Well, hello again. Welcome to Horror in Detail. Today we are going to share Skinwalker encounter stories. First story. I worked as an overnight security guard at a local college. I quit after seeing something in the parking lot. I had just gone through a pretty rough divorce a few months ago. For the brief 2 years my ex and I were married, most of our nights ended up turning into shouting matches and insults. We were always so loud we had gotten several noise complaints and an eventual ultimatum that we could be thrown out of the building. Anyway, we ended the whole thing, and she got the most of everything. The house belonged to her family, along with most of everything in it. She let me only have my clothes, some photos, and my dog, Riley. I was short on money at the time. Luckily, a friend of mine let me stay in his home for as long as I needed. While there, I was looking for a better paying job to help me get my life back on track. My search led me to an opening for a campus security guard at the local community college. I arrived at the interview, to learn that this was a job for the night shift. I wasn't too sure about taking the job at first, but my bills and growing debts weren't going to pay off themselves. Needless to say, I started the next night. The campus itself was a decent size, both in terms of area and the number of students. The core campus includes 14 educational and auxiliary buildings. The security office was by the south entrance of the college, situated on the second floor of the parking garage. The two senior security guards, James and Darnell, walked me through my job description. My task every night was to complete 2 full searches around campus, checking all the buildings and monitoring the security cameras. My shift would start at 9:30 at night and go through 6 o'clock in the morning, by which time I'd take the bus home. The job itself wasn't too bad. I kind of developed a friendship between James and Darnell, since there was a brief period of time our shifts would overlap. By the time they both left, it would be midnight for me, and I'd be alone on campus. It's so surreal how such a place that's bustling and full of students can quickly empty out and turn silent. When my shift starts, there's usually a few cars left in the lot for those who took evening classes. Some instructors and other staff would sometimes work extra late, but those instances were rare. In short, my interaction with other people besides my coworkers was almost non-existent. Sometimes on break or in between circuits, if it stayed quiet on campus, I'd read a book, or listen to spooky stories on my phone. After listening, I would start to feel a little creeped out for being in a campus all alone after dark, but I got used to it. It killed the boredom until I started my next circuit started. I wouldn't find much of anything out of the ordinary, aside from the random object left behind by a student, which I would bring back to the lost and found. I just had to make sure no one else was hanging around after closing. After coming back, I would check the security footage in case I missed something. There were a few screens recording specific spots with the most activity during the day. One for each parking lot, one for each floor in all the buildings, and one for the administrative office. I got decent pay every couple of weeks. After a while, I moved out of my friend's house and got a small apartment and was saving up for a used car. I felt like my luck was starting to turn around finally. Then, I had the scariest experience of my life. I was left alone around midnight like always. The campus was absolutely deserted at this time like normal. It was summer during this time, so the night was pretty warm. I felt like I was building a bit of sweat in my security uniform while doing my first circuit. I came back to the security office, after finding nothing of note, and checked the camera feed. I found nothing in any of the screens until I checked the one for the south lot, near the office. While the screen was small, I could discern the moving of a large shadow across one of the lamp posts. It was doing nothing but moving back and forth across the light. The shadow looked too large to be some small bird or animal. I deduced it had to be someone parked off screen so I couldn't visibly see them. I went out there to check things out and found nothing there. If it were a person just fucking around, they would have to have left a sign of their presence. There was nothing left behind. I didn't hear a car driving off, or any noise for that matter. I scoped the rest of the south lot to find the source of the shadow. Still nothing. I sighed in annoyance at the thought of some jackass deciding to waste my time. Nothing else happened the rest of the night. I got used to sleeping during the day, but all I could afford to sleep on was a cheap couch that was anything but comfortable. It was rare that I got a full 8 hours of sleep on it, and to top it off, the AC unit had crapped out. My cheap apartment had gotten warmer, making much harder to sleep. I got to the college at the start of my shift with maybe 5.5 hours of sleep. I had coffee but it only lasted for so long. With it being extremely late, my office feeling cool, and it being quiet everywhere, I started feeling drowsy. Sleeping on the job wasn't allowed, of course, but every now and then I let myself have a brief nap to refresh myself. So I set my head on the desk and fell asleep instantly. I was later jolted awake. A feeling of something very wrong switched my tired mind on alert and woke me up. I rubbed my eyes and checked the monitors to see if anything was up. I looked at the camera feed for the south lot, and my eyes narrowed. Beneath one of the lamp lights, a person was standing. Not doing anything, just being very still. I couldn't make out any details, but this person had long black hair, and looked very tall for almost reaching the light. I looked at the bottom of the screen and found the camera was still recording. Whoever the camera was showing was still there. The feeling that jolted me awake intensified, and I was aware of myself shaking. A chill colder than the air inside the office crept up my neck. My body was reacting to some sort of danger the image was giving off. Still, a weird person on the security footage was not an excuse to not do my job. I got to the lot in under a minute, and I saw that person still standing under the lamplight. Just being dead still. Their back was facing toward me, and their head seemed to be bowed forward. As I approached closer and tried to get their attention, I found that this trespasser was very tall and lanky and was wearing a dirty white dress. I called to her again, asking if she needed help, but didn't respond. She just kept standing like a statue where she was. I reached out to touch her and my hand retracted back from the burning sensation her skin gave off, as if she were on fire. I cursed and shook my hand to cool it off, and the lady moved for the first time. Her head lifted upward, as if finally acknowledging I was there. She turned around, and I started to track backwards. Her body was humanoid, but she had the head of a goat or ram. The fur was pitch black, contrasting against her pale skin and white dress. The eyes were red like burning embers and strands of flesh hung off its curved horns. As my backwards walk sped up, I could hear it give off a deep, thunderous roar. I ran back towards the office, and I swear I could hear the thing sprinting after me. I ran faster than I ever have in my life, and I barricaded myself in the security office. For good measure, I switched off the lights inside, and called 911. I told them something was on campus, and they sent someone over. I hung up and strained my ears to hear any noise outside my office. It was hard to notice anything other than the pounding of my heart working overtime. It felt like an eternity before I heard the knocking at the door. The cops notified their presence, and I slowly opened the door. They questioned me about what I called for. When I told them, they looked at me as if I were a mental patient or a drug user. I played the footage back for them and there the thing was. At the very least, they weren't going to arrest me for making a fake emergency call, but with the trespasser gone, there wasn't much they could do. They left, and I was once again alone. This time I was very afraid. Not that I was alone, but afraid that I wasn't alone, and that thing was still out there. I wasn't taking any chances. I waited in that office, and kept the door locked until the end of my shift. I left a note saying I resigned immediately, and I never went back. Second story. This story was shared by you/Colarchitect. College dorm, freshman year. I just finished my first year in college. It was a blast. I met new people, gained new friends, experienced moments I thought I would never experience, and fell in love with a ghost. I would love to detail every moment of my first year college, but that'll take days. Instead, I'll tell you how I met Lily, the dorm ghost. A little background about my dorm first. I lived in a co-ed dorm. Boys and girls live on the same floor and share the same bathroom. But each of us only were paired up with a same-gender roommate, so no girl and boy in one room. Now the bathroom part surprised me at first. Before I came to the college, I had no inkling that the bathrooms were co-ed. At first, I was reluctant to use the bathroom because I felt uncomfortable sharing bathroom habits with my fellow female floor mates. However, as time progressed, I felt more comfortable using the bathroom while there are girls in it. In fact, sometimes the girls and I would have a shower karaoke, and no, we did not use one shower stall. There was 5 enclosed shower stalls, so there was total privacy. But I'm not here to talk about sharing the bathroom with girls. No, I'm here to talk about Lily. The first time I heard about Lily was when one of the upperclassmen I met in architecture studio told how a girl who lived in my dorm, 30 years before my first year, killed herself. I thought, why would she give up her life like that? The upperclassman shrugged and said, must be her decision. Her decision. Valid enough. I asked the upperclassman how she killed herself. He replied, rumor is she hanged herself. Another claim was that she dropped herself from the 7th floor. Your dorm floor, matter of fact. When he said the girl killed herself on my dorm floor, I somehow had goosebumps. Now, I never really cringe or get goosebumps unless I see an open wound or blood. Yet somehow, I felt gooseprickles all over me. Seeing that the upperclassman was just lounging around anyway, I decided to prod further. I asked what was her name. Lily, her name was Lily. I mulled over the name. What a pretty name, I thought. The upperclassman noticed my interest on the story. He looked at me and said, you know, the school holds records of past events. You can always check the library or somewhere like that. I nodded at his suggestion. I thought to myself that as soon as I finish this weekly arch project, I'll research on Lily. Now a little background again. I am architecture major, structural engineering minor. I spend my time drawing, observing, and studying buildings and their structures. Also, that means I spend most of my time in studio. The studios in my college is just like any other college, architecture studios. A floor-wide room with individual desks situated together, tall glass windows to let in plenty of natural light, and a decent lounge to hang out after a long day of work. Since I spend most of my time at studio, I have a sleeping bag hidden under my desk. When I have to meet a deadline the next day, I usually sleep in studio. I'm not the only one who does that, so it was pretty normal to camp in studio. At night, just like any other room, the studio is lit by those yellowish-whitish lights. The lights give off a warm, cozy feel to the studio. The lights are programmed automatically, that is, they turn on only when they sense that there is not enough light and if there are people moving about, and turns off when there is no one in the room or senses that there is no movement. Usually, I do not like sleeping in a lit place. I prefer dark rooms because I've been trained to sleep without the lights on. So whenever I camp in studio, I go to the extra room beside the photography room. I call it the extra room because no one uses it. The room is as big as normal classroom. But since no one uses it for classes, the extra room became a storage room for dilapidated desks and chairs and whatever materials that students or faculty no longer use. Whenever I camp, usually there are at least 20 other students or friends who will be working throughout the night. So I was not alone at most nights. Even when I wake up at around 2 or 3 in the morning, there are still people working. One night, however, something weird occurred. It was the night before we will present our midterm projects, so the studio was packed. Most if not all students were working their asses off, wanting to create a unique design for presentation. It felt like a normal and fun night. However, as the night grew I became more tired. I decided to get a shut-eye in the extra room. As I took out my sleeping bag, I noticed something in the periphery of my eye. My desk is literally beside one of the tall glass windows, so I can see outside. Looking out, you could see roofs and trees. However, during that night in my periphery I saw some sort of floating figure. It was a bit pitch black outside, so I was not sure if I really saw something. I looked out the window to check if there was really something floating there. Nada. Just pitch black and stars and crescent moon. I ignored it. Before I slept, I looked around the studio. There was about 30 or 40 or so in the studio working. It was quiet, just like a library, except there was soft bossa nova playing in the background. Tired as hell, I went to the extra room. As always, it was pitch dark. I turned on the lights, but the lights stayed shut. Odd, I thought. Maybe the school is really cutting this room off. However, thanks to the streaming soft moonlight coming through the small window, I was able to find my usual spot, the left corner by the abandoned-looking desk. I laid down my sleeping bag, ready to get some shut-eye. But then I perked up as I noticed something in my periphery again, eerily familiar with the one I noticed by my desk. I looked to the left. Nothing there except broken desks and chairs. I reasoned that I was just tired as fuck, that's why I'm seeing things. I go to sleep. I don't know how long I was asleep, but when I woke up I saw that the moon is shining brighter. There was something beautiful about how the way the moonlight streamed in through the window. But something was amiss. My instincts told me something was misplaced. I stood up, looked around the room, and spotted what was amiss. A chair. A broken chair, with only 3½ legs holding it up. I don't know what compelled me to do it, but I went to the chair and sat on it. The chair was facing the window, where the moonlight streamed in. I sat there, watched the way the dust motes danced in the moonlight. Then I saw it. The ghost, specter, whatever explanation I could give it. It revealed itself slowly, it emerged slowly from the pitch dark, as if it was dislodging itself from the pitch black and moved towards the moonlight. At that moment, I did not really know if I was dreaming or I was really seeing this. But oddly, I did not feel fear or anything. I just watched the damn thing float and slowly dislodge itself from the darkness beside the moonlight. I blinked and blinked and blinked. The ghost did not disappear. For what it seemed like a long moment, I just looked at the floating figure. It had long hair. The face was blurry, but I could make out a face. Funny thing is, I remember thinking it had a pretty face, like the faces of those pretty models you see in fashion magazines. Then flick, the thing disappeared. At that moment, I heard my breathing. I was breathing heavily, as if I just did hill sprints. I don't know if I was breathing like that the whole time, but that was what scared me. I was not aware that I was breathing so heavily and that my body was literally shaking all over, making the chair rattle. The next day I recounted what happened to me to my roommate. He looked at me and asked, "Have you been smoking again?" I wanted to slap him there and there. I never smoke substances, as they take a bad toll in my athletic performance. But I held my hand and just said, "No. Maybe I was just really tired." Then we both went to go eat, me slowly forgetting what happened last night. As we were eating, my roommate brought up Lily, the girl who killed herself. He said he unearthed some info about her. Your friend was right. She killed herself. But not before she tried to kill her roommate. Kill her roommate? Why would she want to kill her roommate? However, I just ignored my roommate and concentrated on eating. I did not want to talk about dead girls and whatnot. The hour of presentation has arrived. I dressed up nicely, not too formal or too casual. My heart was racing as I set up my design boards and models. The presentation room was abuzz with people excited to see what students have come up with. That put my heart in a light mood, making me forget what happened last night and the dead girl Lily. After a while, people settled down, ready for presentation. It would be an hour before it was my turn to present, so I took a sit next to one of my studio mates. As people presented, we students took down some notes. However, being the short attention span student that I am, I just started to doodle and sketch. Nothing interesting much. I doodled some building designs that my fellow students did, drew the faces of some of the people who were drowsing off, and sketched some car designs that came to my head. However, after a little while, I started sketching a face. All I can remember is that I felt like I had to draw the face. My hand itched to sketch the eyes, the nose, the lips, the cheeks, the hair, that I saw during that night I saw the ghost. It was as if I was in a trance, unable to think of anything else except for that face I saw. Then I heard my sit-mate say, "Wow. That's pretty. Not that one though, the one on the upper page." "But who is that, the one you drew on the bottom page?" "She looks pretty." Confused, I just said, "Huh." Then I looked at my sketchbook. On top of the page I drew on, I sketched a face of a girl. Only this face was contorted and gross. The mouth was deformed, the lips ripped apart, and the eyes were full of hatred. In contrast, the face that I drew on the bottom page was a pretty face. The eyes were soft and gentle and the mouth was dainty. I was impressed. Really impressed. I was really impressed because I never was really good with sketching people's faces. The faces I would try to draw would turn out disproportionate or just plain cartoonish. But the faces I drew, both the ugly one and pretty one, turned out nice. I looked at the pretty one, wondering why I drew her. My sitmate asked again who she was. I replied, "Lily." After presentations I went straight to the bathroom and vomited. I vomited because not only did I botch my presentation, but also kept remembering that night. The face kept popping in my head as I presented my design. The name, Lily, kept playing in my head, the grotesque face kept floating behind my eyes, and disgustingly I was falling in love with the pretty face I sketched. I sat there in the bathroom stall, crying like an ass clown. As the weeks passed, I researched more on Lily. I went to the library as soon as I had the free time to. I found out that Lily died around October of 1985. Her cause of death was apparent suicide. It was reported that first she tried to hang herself, but one of her floormates stopped her. Then she jumped out of her 7th-floor dorm room. I looked frantically for a picture of her, obsessing over her. Then alas, I stumbled across a somewhat blurry photo of her from the old newspaper I found. She was really pretty. No, she was beautiful. I stared at the picture for how long I do not know. I just remember that my heart was beating fast and that I was comparing her face with the pretty face I sketched. They eerily matched. And I was deeply, obsessively, falling in love with the face, with the dead girl Lily. I ran to my dorm room. By the time I reached my dorm, I was wheezing for breath. And yet the only thing on my mind was Lily and the thought that somehow I will be able to see her tonight. I opened the room forcefully, not knowing really what I was gonna do. I see my roommate jacking off. Disgusted, I shut the door and leave and head to my studio instead. In my head I hear a whisper, he is such a pig. All he does is play his video games and jack off. You can't even go to your own dorm room. I stop and look around. No one was walking with me, and yet it felt like as if someone was talking with me as I walk. I shake my head. No, I'm not going crazy. But I was. I reach my studio. Since our next project was due in another 2 weeks, no one was really working. There was maybe 2 or 3 people lounging around the studio. Besides them, the studio was empty. It was getting dark and eerily I was getting excited by the thought that I would see the figure again. I worked on other school work till I felt sleepy. When I could no longer work, I went straight to the extra room. It was pitch black. I was expecting the moonlight to shine inside, but there was no moonlight, so the room was very pitch dark. It did not matter. I still fell asleep. After a while, I wake up. I check the time, 2:20 a.m. I look towards the window. And there she was. Lily. It was the same ghost I saw before. No longer as blurry as before, her face looked at me. It was the most beautiful face I have ever seen. I stood up and went towards her. She did not move, just stayed there as still as a statue. Her eyes, I noticed, were dirty brown with a greenish tint. But it looked dead, beautiful but dead. Nevertheless, I looked at them, deeply, disturbingly falling in love with her. I tried to touch her, but she disappeared. I look around, desperately wishing she'd come back. And then I saw her, sitting on the same chair I sat before. I went to her, knelt and said, I want you. Take me with you, wherever that may be. She smiled. It was then her face grotesquely, like the one I sketched. Her eyes turned old and ugly and her pupils became black as hell. Her mouth grinned widely, her lips torn and hanging from her teeth. I remember choking up a scream and then passing out. The next morning I found myself sprawled on the floor beside the chair. The sunlight is streaming in through the window. I checked the time. 11:10 a.m. Fuck, I just missed most of my classes, I thought. I tried to get up, but was stopped by a throbbing headache and a sharp pain in my lower back. I mustered all my strength just to get out of the extra room. As it was 11 o'clock in the morning, the studio was filled with my fellow studio mates. It was during this hour that studio class starts. I go to my desk, not saying anything to the people who turned their heads to look at me. I sat down, rubbed my eyes, and looked at the people around me. They were looking at me and were stealing whispers to each other. I ignored them and just took out my studio materials. Finally, one of my classmates beside me said, "Bro, you look beat up. Is that blood? Blood? Oh fuck no," I thought to myself. He was pointing at my lower back side. I looked at my shirt. It was stained dark by blood. I felt all the hair in my body stand up. I rushed out of the studio towards the bathroom. Inside the bathroom, I removed my shirt off. I looked at the mirror. My lower back was drenched with dried blood and a long open wound gaped from the bottom of my left nipple towards my right upper buttocks. I let out a curdling scream. I wake up in our school hospital. The white lights blinded me as I tried to open my eyes. I tried to get up, only to be stopped by a searing pain. Fuck, now I'm dead was all I could think. But that thought was dispelled as my roommate entered the room. For some odd reason, I felt annoyed by his presence. But I did not show it. He asked me how I was doing. I just looked at him, stared at his eyes, then looked away. He said he'll stay for a bit. I nodded. As I laid down in the hospital bed, I kept remembering the face of Lily. At first it was the beautiful face, then it would mutate to the grotesque face. Time passed by, how long I don't know. Then I hear my roommate snoring. The annoying feeling I felt grew to a small hatred. "Kill him. Kill him. Kill him," a voice whispered in my head. "No, I won't. I can't. He's a friend still." I replied to the whisper. "No, just do it. He just annoys you anyway," the whisper replied back. "No. I won't dash," I was saying to myself, and then the whisper screamed, "Kill him," I said. "Kill him or I'll kill you." I screamed, wishing that the whisper would go away. My roommate jolted up, rushed to me, and hushed me. The nurses came in and calmed me down. That same day, I woke up in the night. My roommate was asleep on the sofa in front of my bed. I checked the time. 2:17 a.m. I tried to sit up again despite the stabbing pain in my back. I wanted my sketchbook. I looked around and saw it, eerily sitting on the desk beside me. I reasoned that my roommate may have brought it with him, knowing that he knows that will be the first thing I would want. I take the sketchbook and the pencil beside it. I flipped through it, looking at doodles and sketches I did. Then I found the page where I drew the two faces of Lily. The grotesque one looks as if it was smiling at me mockingly. I looked away. I regarded the pretty face I drew. As I look at the pretty face, I was falling in love again. I was growing more and more restless, wishing that I was looking at Lily's beautiful face again. As I stared at the pretty face, I could hear the snore of my roommate. Then slowly, I noticed that the snore grew less loud. Then it stopped, the room became eerily quiet. I look up to see if my roommate was still there. He was still there. But someone was sitting beside his sleeping body. When I saw her in the extra room, she was glowing softly white despite the darkness around her. This time, however, she was eerily glowing black. But her face was still beautiful. Again, that same falling in love feeling came over me as she approached my hospital bed. Those same dead, beautiful eyes looked at mine. Ignoring the pain that stabbed through me, I reached out my hand to touch her face. I touched it. It felt like porcelain and it was cold. But I did not mind. I got out of the bed and stood up. I was taller than her by a head. I cupped her face with both of my hands. Cold, her cheeks were so cold. I brushed her lips with my thumb. It felt soft and yet lifeless at the same time. Her brown-green eyes looked so tantalizing, yet so dead. No longer able to control it, I pressed my lips against hers. Oh, the sweet rush I felt. Her tongue was cold and yet soft. I don't know for how long I kissed this damn ghost, but then suddenly I hear a gasp. I dislodge my lips from her and look for the source of the gasp. My roommate. Sitting up like a stupid dog, his face was agape. His mouth hung open loosely, his eyes wide as eggs. I furrowed my brows and growled. I growled like a rabid wolf about to kill its prey. I was about to go towards him when suddenly Lily disappeared and the lights turned on and a nurse came in. And that's when the fiery pain engulfed my whole body and made me collapse. I woke up the next day, not knowing if it was morning or afternoon. Despite the headache, I did not feel any pain anymore. I sat up, trying to remember what happened. I vividly recall the events that took place last night. Lily's ghost appearing, me kissing her, and that stupid gaping face of my roommate. The moment I thought of my roommate, I felt a rush of anger. I checked myself, wondering where did this anger come from. A doctor came in and made his diagnosis. I asked him what happened. He told me that I suffered a lesion in my lower back, but thankfully they were able to fix it before it caused me my life. He then asked how I got it. I shrugged, not entirely sure how I got the wide cut. Nevertheless, he said I will be fine and that I will be ready to leave in 2 days' time. So I recovered during those 2 days, wondering what I might have missed in school. I went back to my dorm, just hoping to get rest and to make sense in all what's happening. Friends ask me what's wrong and what happened. I shrugged them all away. All I could think of is that kiss and how I wished it did not end. And how I would kill myself just for another kiss from her. I tried to dispel all thoughts of Lily. I slept again. I dreamed of her. Instead of the eerie glow she had, she looked human. She looked unearthly beautiful. In the dream I go up to her. She embraces me as if she is saying her lover again. I hold her tight, not wanting anything to change. I then kiss her, this time more passionately. It felt very human, very warm and wet. Then suddenly, she abruptly pulls away. Her lips and teeth are bleeding red. She is smiling. Then she raises her hand, a knife in the end of it. She brings it down and stabs me in the head, then takes it out and then slashes my chest, then stabs me again in the head. I try to scream but my blood just gurgles out of my throat. Her beautiful face splattered with blood as the hand and the knife went up and down, up and down. And all the while, all I could remember thinking was that she is fucking beautiful. Then the last stab came. Her hand raised up high, she wipes away the blood in her eyes and mouth. She smiles and then brings down the knife in between my eyes. I jolt up awake, breathing heavily. I look around my dorm room. I caught the time. 2:19 a.m. Fast asleep, my roommate was sprawled in his bed. That same anger I felt in the hospital boiled in me again. I heard myself growling. I went back to my dorm, just hoping to get rest and to make sense in all what's happening. Friends ask me what's wrong and what happened. I shrugged them all away. All I could think of is that kiss and how I wished it did not end. And how I would kill myself just for another kiss from her. I tried to dispel all thoughts of Lily. I slept again. I dreamed of her. Instead of the eerie glow she had, she looked human. She looked unearthly beautiful. In the dream I go up to her. She embraces me as if she is saying her lover again. I hold her tight, not wanting anything to change. I then kiss her, this time more passionately. It felt very human, very warm and wet. Then suddenly, she abruptly pulls away. Her lips and teeth are bleeding red. She is smiling. Then she raises her hand, a knife in the end of it. She brings it down and stabs me in the head, then takes it out and then slashes my chest, then stabs me again in the head. I try to scream but my blood just gurgles out of my throat. Her beautiful face splattered with blood as the hand and the knife went up and down, up and down. And all the while, all I could remember thinking was that she is fucking beautiful. Then the last stab came. Her hand raised up high, she wipes away the blood in her eyes and mouth. She smiles and then brings down the knife in between my eyes. I jolt up awake, breathing heavily. I look around my dorm room. I caught the time. 2:19 a.m. Fast asleep, my roommate was sprawled in his bed. That same anger I felt in the hospital boiled in me again. I heard myself growling. Appalled by my beastly anger, I shook away the thought of killing my roommate. I climbed down of my bed and went to the bathroom. I went to one of the shower stalls, turned on the shower and stepped right in naked. The warm water felt good as it rushed down my body. I touched the wound in my lower back. It felt soft. Then I heard the bathroom door open and close. Might be someone out for a piss, I thought. However, instead of hearing a bathroom stall open, I heard one of the shower doors open and then the shower turning on. My senses prickled. Something is wrong. I decided to check who it was by humming a tune and then whistling a melody. That's how I would start bathroom karaoke with the girls on my floor. I stopped my whistle and waited for a reply. Silence. I waited, doubting that it was one of the girls. Then the whistle came. It was on the tune of an old bossa nova song I would hum when I worked in studio. This calmed me, thinking that it was one of the girls. So I started to sing the song and the other person in the other stall did too. And so we sang in the shower stall, laughing whenever we got the lyrics wrong. After a while, I turned off the shower and said that I'm leaving now. I waited for a reply. Again, silence. Then the voice replied, okay. I chuckled and said, I'll see you tomorrow morning. The next morning I went to our floor's lounge. As usual, everyone was there, except for my roommate. They asked me how I was and I told them I'm doing fine. Then I asked the girls who was the one who took a shower last night and sang with me. They looked at me and then to each other. Each of them shook their head no. Confused, I told them that there was definitely someone singing with me last night. Their faces grew fearful and they asked me to stop fooling around. Seeing that they are being serious, I just shrugged and said I must have been dreaming. Only, I was not. I went back to my dorm room. It felt chilly. I looked towards the window. Funny, I thought you were closed when I left, I thought to myself as I closed the window. At that instant, my roommate entered the room. Again, the bestial anger rose when I saw him. However, the anger washed away after pity took over. His face became somewhat gaunt, his skin somewhat pale. His eyes, once always congenial and understanding, seemed very fearful and sad. I asked him what was wrong. He just looked at me and then cried. I've never heard such a cry before. It was as if he was wailing, only he was trying to suppress all the sadness from overflowing. I go up to him, hushed him, saying that everything was all right. He leaned his head on my chest, his body convulsing with every sob he let out. For what seemed like a long moment we just stayed there, his crying flowing as if it had no end. It's been about a month now since that moment when my roommate convulsed with utter sadness. We moved out of our dorm without any disturbance. It was a bitter-sweet moment leaving the room. Despite the strange things that happened, that dorm room bonded me and my roommate together. Before I said goodbye to my roommate, I took him out to lunch. We both ate and chatted happily. We laughed as we reflected back on our journey as a freshman in college. After a while, we just stayed quiet, letting the good feeling wash over us. Then he looked at me and said, "Lily killed herself because her roommate fucked Lily's boyfriend. Now I know why she wanted her roommate dead." I waved no and told him to forget about all of that. But I did not. Now I am back home, letting time pass by before I start my second year. Everything seemed back to normal again till yesterday. After talking again to a former lover in high school, I invited her to come home. Things got hot and steamy, so we did it. After, she and I just laid down and cuddled. We slowly drifted off to sleep. Then I wake up suddenly. I could feel the warmth of my former high school lover's body. I groggily check the time. 2:10 a.m. I sigh and close my eyes. However, my eyes jolt up widely. There she was, across my room, Lily with her dead eyes full of hatred and fury. All I can remember is a loud growl and her rushing to me with those hatred eyes. "She's behind you now." Third story. This story was shared by you/colorblindness. My college roommate brings home a different girl every night. My name is Jeremy, and as a freshman in college I know not to complain too much about issues with housing. I'm on the low end of the totem pole, be happy with what I've got, it could always be worse. I've heard all of this before and for a while, I've accepted that. But I simply can't. Not anymore. Why, may you ask? Because of my roommate, Alex. Alex is everything that I wish I could be. Outgoing. Confident. A jock and a ladies' man. And that last part is definitely where the trouble started. After about a month of my first semester, Alex began to bring home a different girl almost every single night. It was always the same type, Barbie blonde hair, pale skin, perfect body and flirty personality. When they came over for the night it was nearly impossible to get anything accomplished. Our dorm is not big first off, there is hardly enough room for two people and bringing in a third, and sometimes more if Alex was feeling really cocky, was claustrophobic on a good day. If I was in the kitchen I could hear them in the den, watching Netflix on loud or playing video games. Anytime I tried to bring up that they were being distracting, Alex would scoff at me. "Grow a pair, ja," he would tell me with the girl right in front of my face. It was annoying, condescending and altogether just wrong. Some of the time he would be nice and suggest I go to my room if I was bothered, but our walls are paper thin around here. I could hear everything. And I do mean, everything. Alex was apparently an excellent lover in bed. As a single guy trying to just scrape by freshman year, you bet his wild escapades had an effect on me. Still, I was willing to let it all go because every morning the girl he invited would always be gone before I woke to eat breakfast. Even if they did come over just for a fling, at least they were nice enough to clean up and leave, I told myself. It was these little reassurances that let me keep my guard down and not really pay much attention to Alex and his revolving parade of beautiful blondes. I didn't think anything of it, until one day while in class one of my mates asked if I was having any issues with Alex. Besides the pizza, partying and constant one-night stands he throws. Nah, I joked with a smirk. But this friend looked dead serious. Something was bothering them. He's the guy that dated Chloe Grahammer, right? He asked. I shrugged. The name didn't sound familiar. I don't know, he's had a ton of girls over. It's a bit overwhelming, I admitted. How many would you say? 5? 6? My friend asked as we walked to the cafeteria. Oh, a lot higher than that. Probably 30 by now. Always a new one every time too, I told them. We found a seat near the back of the auditorium. My friends seemed to have something important on their mind. Jeremy, don't you think it's a bit odd that he has slept with that many women? And that quite a few of them don't even stay in college after their fling with Alex, he said. This was news to me, so I asked further what they meant. Exactly what I said. I know of at least 6 girls that have left campus, or so the story goes. I don't even know if those rumors are true. I just know they aren't around anymore, he said. I guess I could look into it, I'm sure there's a logical explanation, I told them. All right. Just be careful. I don't trust that dude, they said. I resolved I would talk with Alex the next chance I got, or at least maybe talk to one of the girls he brought in. The next night, as was routine, Alex went to grab a shower and told me to watch the door for the pizza delivery. I was trying to catch up on calculus when there was a knock on the door and I went to answer. Instead of Domino's, it was his girl for the night, Rebecca. Oh, hey Jeremy, she said with a soft smile. I let her in and told her Alex would be right out. Oh, that's okay, I just wanted to see you, she said as she pulled me next to the couch and whispered that my friend from class had sent her. Just go with this, okay? She said as she started to pull me toward her. I was a bit stunned but didn't resist. The amazing moment didn't last long though. Alex was out of the shower and grabbed Rebecca by her ponytail. What the hell is this? Trying to steal my girl, he snarled as he smacked me across the face. I was too stunned to speak and Becca looked both scared and surprised by his outburst. No one touches them except for me. You hear me? Alex screamed as he slammed Becca against the wall and was about to hit her in the face. I stopped him and took the beat down, telling her to run. After about 5 minutes of Alex going into rage mode, I was a bloody pulp and blacking out. He was shouting and cussing and telling me I was worth less than dirt. The rest of the night was a blur. When I woke up, my whole body was in pain. And Alex acted like everything was normal. As if nothing at all had happened. I could hardly see out of my right eye. I got out of my dorm for a sec to find Becca and figure out what the hell all of that had been for. When we met in the college courtyards, she had a hard time not bursting into tears when she saw my bruised and swollen face. Jeremy, I'm so sorry you had to experience that. But it looks like we were right. Alex is a monster. These girls aren't just leaving the college. He is doing something to them when they come to see him. I don't know how he is getting away with it, but he must be strong. Imagine what he does to them just by the look of you, she said nervously. I just want to know why he attacked me, I said. Possessive. He wanted to control me, the same way he does all those other girls. I'm not sure what he is doing to get them there. But every one of those girls is in danger. He might even be killing them. Becca told me. Well then call college security or something. I don't even want to go back in there, I told her. We can't yet. Not until we get evidence. Jeremy, I'm sorry to ask this, but you're the only one. Find out what happened to those girls, she pleaded with me. I sighed in frustration, but I knew she was right. That night I decided to stay up and wait until I was sure that Alex and his latest fling had gone to his bedroom. I kept to myself and didn't even make contact with him, his terrifying assault too recent for me to consider confronting him. Yet I knew I couldn't just avoid him forever. I needed to know what he was doing for sure. So I did what any tech-savvy roommate might do and got a nanny cam. Hidden amid his cheesy alt-rock posters, I let it record all night to figure out precisely what was happening. When I checked the recording the next day, I fast-forwarded through until the part where I saw that the girl was lying stiff as a board. Then to my surprise I saw Alex set up some camera equipment of his own. He locked the door first, tied up the girl where she was spread eagle. Clothes still on thankfully. And then Alex was standing over them and looking like he was about to kill them when he took out what looked like a hand saw and proceeded to do just that. I watched in terror as he chopped up the girl into pieces. Blood and tissue spilled everywhere. Before I could even register what was happening, he was placing the body parts in containers. There was a secret wall behind his bed, each with labels that had names of the body on them. He saved the head for last, and I saw on the video that the container he stored it in seemed to have at least a dozen. My roommate is a serial killer, I thought. But it only got worse from there. At the end of the tape he looked directly into my camera and smiled. My heart was pounding. This one was for you, Joe. Then it went to static. To my surprise the tape immediately was erased. Corrupted. Alex must have corrupted the data. I left the dorm immediately when I realized the danger I was in. I don't know what to do, but I can't stay here. I think I'm going to just drop out. It would probably be safer than the alternative. Fourth story. This story was shared by you/ugly_spoon. My university wants me dead. I am an 18-year-old uni student at a mid-sized university. I live on campus as I cannot yet afford to live off campus and my family lives over 6 hours away. I can't tell my story to anyone because anyone I tell will either think I'm crazy or know I am not. I decided to choose this school over others in the state after I found one of their flyers while going through my mail. Normally, these college recruitment letters go directly in the trash, but something about this one felt different. Maybe it was the font or the beautiful scenery or the mouths that smiled just a bit too wide, but I begged my mom to go with me to take a tour. After a few days of my pleading, she begrudgingly agreed. We drove the 6 hours across the state, checked into the hotel, and set our alarms bright and early to make it to the tour the next day. I said goodnight to my mother and turned the light out. For a split second, I saw something. I have no fucking clue what that something was, but it was absolutely there. I sat in silence for at least an hour before somehow drifting to sleep. The next morning, we woke up and I had all but forgotten about the thing I had seen in my room last night. Something just drew me towards this college, just thinking about it made me excited. The tour went off without a hitch. The guide showed us around the different points of interest, the rec center, the student dining hall, and of course, the freshman dorms. As a working high school student and child of a single mother with 3 older siblings, I knew that money would be a challenge. I was worried when the guide started to take us into these rooms. They were each a private living space, complete with in-room bathrooms, a community kitchen, and a game room with every console I could think of. I could tell by the look on my mom's face that she had already made her decision on if I was going. We completed the tour back at the rec center where we were encouraged to grab a bite to eat at the on-site restaurant, on the house. During our meal, my mother and I discussed my options. Due to where I lived, there weren't many other options for cheaper universities, even with my grades and test scores. I flipped through a little booklet that they had given me at the beginning of the tour, and found the section titled Rates. To my shock, their rates were some of the lowest I had seen anywhere, and the scholarships available to me were exactly what I needed. I showed them to my mom and she frowned. How can they afford to pay for all of these grand amenities if the rates are so low? I just shrugged, not thinking much more of it. Soon, it was time for me to declare my university of choice. I hadn't really thought about it for a while, and no other university in my area could give me a good education for the price I needed. So, without even thinking, I chose my university. Move-in day arrived. My mother and brothers tearfully sent me off, yelling, "See you at Thanksgiving," as I started the next chapter of my life. During the drive, I pictured the next stages of my life. My first Thanksgiving as a college student, my first real boyfriend, my graduation, my first real job. In some way or another, all of my fantasies led back to this university. That night, I sat in my bed, staring at my new home for the next 8 months. I couldn't help but smile thinking about all of the memories I was going to make here. I lowered my head to the pillow and heard a blood-curdling shriek. I immediately shot my head up, turning my lamp on and in the light, for a split second, seeing a face. My own, staring back at me with dead eyes and my mouth hanging abnormally open. I let out my own shriek, and to my horror, a few seconds later, another shriek rang out from my hallway. That night, I slept with all of my lights on. For a few weeks, nothing fully out of the ordinary happened. I began to settle into my courses and began to make friends with some kids in my hall. There was no mention of what happened that first night. I think we were all too afraid that if someone else acknowledged it, it would have really happened. We did our best to ignore the strange goings-on at the university, a professor going missing with no follow-up investigation, an unidentified animal lurking around the library, a diary with complete gibberish being left at some guy's door. Weird things happened, but that was just how it was. We didn't want to cause a stinkin' fear of losing our scholarships and chances of a future. A few days ago, this fear became trivial. One of the best things about the location of this university is that at night, the wildlife is at its most active. You could lift up your window and hear the buzzing of insects, the chittering of the nocturnal creatures, the gentle whisper of the twilight wind. This night, however, it was dead silent. I didn't notice it at first. I had already begun my nighttime routine of getting on my computer and going through my sub box on YouTube, when my phone fell off of my bed and I had to pause my video and take my earbuds out to pick them up. That's when I heard it, or rather, didn't hear it. The total silence occurring outside my window. Looking out, everything seemed to be normal, at least, as normal as it could be. I shrugged it off as just some future storm scaring all of the wildlife into hiding. However, I knew that this was total bullshit. I finished my routine and after a bit of tossing and turning, I fell asleep. I couldn't have been asleep for more than 5 minutes before I woke up again. This time my room was completely empty, save for the bed I was sleeping in. Not a single fucking piece of furniture or decoration was in my room. What the fuck is happening? This has to be a goddamn dream, I remember thinking to myself. I got a strong urge to get out of my bed, and for some reason, I did so. I tiptoed to my door and slowly pulled it open. The hallway was pitch black. I turned my head towards the window at the end of the hall and almost shit myself. It was a void. No trees, no sky. A fucking void. I panned my vision around and noticed a handful of people peeking their heads out of their doors. Before I could react to them, we heard it. A low growl coming from the opposite end of the hallway. In my peripheral vision, I saw it. A black shadow thing. Its eyes were as bright as headlights, blinding you from seeing its true identity. But I could still clearly see its mouth. It hung from between its eyes down to the ground, gaping open. Its body was sharp, yet I felt as though this creature moved fluidly to wherever it desired to go. No one dared look at it, petrified of what would happen if we did. Then it screeched. The sound rattled my brain and shocked my nervous system. I had never heard a sound like it and pray to God I never hear it again. It started to move, taking off down the hallway, both floating and galloping at the same time. Something pulled me by my hair, slamming my door and dragging my head to the floor. As soon as my body hit the ground, I woke up. I was still lying in front of my door. It was morning, but I had no idea what time. I sat for at least 10 minutes, shaking, still uncertain about whether or not it was all just a dream. That was until I opened my door. Claw marks. There were claw marks on my door handle as if something was trying to open my door but couldn't because its hands were too big. I looked down the hallway and sure enough, there were claw marks only on certain doors. Doors that belonged to people I had seen in the hallway the night before. I slowly shut my door, locked it, and curled up in the corner of my bed. I stared at my door for who knows how long. Soon some men came by to replace it, telling me not to talk about it, then promptly leaving. Later that day, I got emails from each of my professors saying that they were not expecting me to do any assignments given to my class for the week, but expected me to be back in class by the following Monday. I have not left my room yet. It has been 4 days. I have not slept, and only leave my bed for coffee, food, and to piss. I closed and locked my window, and taped my shower curtain around it. I keep all of my lights on, and never turn them off. I don't listen to music or watch movies or videos. I need to hear. I have been keeping in contact with all of my friends but one, who hasn't answered any of our calls or texts, but none of us can work up the nerve to leave to check on him. My mom and my brothers won't answer my calls either, but they text me. All the time. Gibberish. The same shit from the diary, just in text form. I have to escape from here, but at this point, I don't know what to fear most, the creature in the hallway or my university. Fifth story. This story was shared by you/Dark Gardens. There's a serial killer at my university. There's a serial killer at Virginia State University. Growing up, my mother had made me watch murder shows with her, which eventually turned me into a paranoid 20-year-old who's afraid of her own shadow. My mother had heard of the killings and begged me to come home, but I couldn't just up and leave in the middle of the semester. I just have to stick it out and hope for the best. I wouldn't be worried if the killer had a pattern, but he didn't. He killed men and women. Nobody was safe. So far, 8 students had been murdered. 6 males and 2 females. He branded them, too, as if he were proud of what he did. He carved what number victim they were on their foreheads. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Hey. My train of thought was interrupted by my roommate, Emma. Hey, I greeted. How's it out there? Pretty quiet. Besides the police cars patrolling, she replied, getting a yogurt out of our fridge and plopping down onto the armchair. Looks like the hash-slinging slasher couldn't wait until midterms were over to begin his little killing spree. Tell me about it, I muttered, flipping through another page in my binder. I'm up to here in study notes. The entire coffee table was scattered with mathematical equations, scientific equations, and 2 English lit books that I had yet to read for next week. No one told you to take 18 units, Emma taunted, scooping a spoonful of yogurt into her mouth. Piss off, Em. Sorry. I'll tell you what, let's go to the library. We still got a few hours to kill before curfew, anyway. I got some studying to do, too. I sighed. I had been in our cramped dorm all day. Maybe a change of scenery would help me focus a bit more. Yeah, sure. Why not? I'll try anything at this point, I muttered and gathered my things. Emma was right. It was terrifyingly quiet outside. Everyone was too scared to come out of their rooms, even though the murders usually took place in the early morning or late at night. Not Emma, though. I guess Emma wasn't afraid of anything. Surprisingly, there were quite a bit of students in the library. Despite everything going on, midterms were still taking place, which to me was a good thing. It kept us distracted from the ugliness outside. What type of rock is this? Emma asked, pointing to a sandy and crumbly rock in her geology textbook. Sedimentary, I mumbled, then went back to solving equations. We studied in silence after that, Emma occasionally asking me about another rock she couldn't identify. Having a change of scenery actually did help me concentrate better. All I had left to do was read the 2 English lit books. An hour later, Emma closed her geology book. I'm beat. Want me to wait for you? I waved my hand, not bothering to look up from my book. Nah, go ahead. I'll be there in half an hour. Okay. See you later. She yawned before gathering her things and leaving the library. The second book was much bigger, but I figured I could read at least a quarter of it before curfew and continue the rest over the weekend. It was a combination of Othello, Hamlet, Alexander Pope's essay criticism and about 3 or 4 other stories. I had finished Othello and gotten to Hamlet when my phone began vibrating. I blindly kept pressing the decline button repeatedly. It was probably Emma and her stupid geology rocks. I was making good time. After Hamlet, I was halfway through Pope when I looked at the library clock. 9:15 p.m. Oh crap. Curfew was at 8:30. I'm dead, I whispered and furiously gathered my things. I hadn't even noticed I was the last one here. I'm dead. I ran out the door, dropping at least 2 of my pencils in the process. It was eerily silent, even more silent than it was earlier. With a nervous sigh, I began fast walking back to my dorm, which was a 15-minute walk. However, with my huge bag and textbooks, it would probably take 25. I pulled out my phone and called Emma, who answered on the first ring. Where the hell are you? I've been calling you for over an hour. I know. I'm sorry. I lost track of time. I'll be there soon, okay? I'm meeting you halfway. Emma, no. Just stay there. Look, if I'm not home by 9:50, then come look for me or call the cops. It's too dangerous for you to leave. She huffed in irritation. Fine. 9:50, not a minute sooner. She hung up before I could reply and I sighed tiredly, stuffing my phone into my pocket. Breaking curfew, too. I jumped 1,000,000 feet in the air, my heart leaping out of my chest as I spun around and met the green eyes of a man. He smiled and ran a hand through his hair. I saw you in the library. Figured you could use a guardian angel, he said. I'm okay. My dorm isn't far from here, I replied. I insist. A lady shouldn't be out by herself at these hours, especially not with a killer on the loose. I can manage. You can never be too safe. Name's Ethan, by the way, he said, walking alongside me much to my dismay. Nice to meet you, I replied. Are you not gonna give me your name? No. Ethan chuckled. All right, fair enough. What year are you in? Junior. Senior. Chemistry major. That's nice. He raised an eyebrow. You don't talk much, do you? Not to strangers in the middle of the night in particular, no, I said. Again, he chuckled. I can respect that. I promise you I'm not a killer. Just looking out. I know I was being kind of a jerk at this point, but something about this guy just seemed off. I couldn't pinpoint it, but my gut instinct told me this guy was bad news. It was still a 10 or so minute walk to my dorm, so when we came across the north dorms, I took this as my chance to book it. This is my stop, I said, stopping in front of the building. Thanks, for the walk to my dorm, I mean. He smiled, white teeth shining against the darkness of the night. Don't mention it. Hey, listen. I know this is a bit straightforward, but could I get your number? My small smile faded. I'm sorry, I'm just. I don't know you. I don't just give out my number like that. His boyish smile was replaced with a hardened expression. Really? I walk you back to your dorm and you can't even give me your number. I never asked you to. I don't owe you anything, Ethan. Gritting my teeth, I turned to walk off when one of his arms suddenly wrapped around me in a bear hug and the other clamped over my mouth. You do owe me, he sneered. He began dragging me towards the woods, and I quickly planted my feet into my fighting stance. I stepped on his foot as hard as I could and slammed my head into his mouth. Once he released me, I spun around and elbowed him in the throat. I must have hit his Adam's apple pretty hard because he gurgled and fell to the ground. A man's groin and throat are always his weak spots. He tried to crawl away, and I kicked him in the head. Well, that's 9 in a row that the terrified, innocent little girl act works, I said, taking my knife out of my back pocket. I flipped Ethan over and pressed my foot into his throat, feeling the crack what was left of his Adam's apple. When a girl says no, Ethan, she means no, I sneered and stomped his throat. His blank, green eyes stared up at the sky and I smirked. After carving the number 9 into his forehead, I picked up my things and quickly ran to my dorm before Emma could throw a fit. After scolding me for breaking curfew, she went to her room and I went to mine. I wasn't supposed to have a number 9 tonight, but Ethan just had to show up and not give me a break. If you're reading this far, please don't think I'm some monster who targets random individuals because I'm not. I target those who do nothing but inflict pain. Partner abusers, women abusers, child abusers and so forth. I think I do a pretty good deed, don't you? As I was about to go to sleep, my phone rang. Seeing my best friend's name on it, I quickly answered. Hello. Hey. How are things over there? I sighed. I didn't have anything planned but I got attacked and had to improvise. Aside from that, all is well. That was number 9. One more to go. I know you can do this. Think of the next person you're saving whenever you have to do it. Yeah, I know. I can always count on you, Wit. You have no idea how proud I am of you, Chloe. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end, subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm.